Hi, this is Alan Dershowitz on the Dershow. Today I'm going to talk about war and peace. We'll start with peace. Peace between Israel and the United Arab Emirates, perhaps Bahrain as well. Great development, great news. Then we'll talk about war. Not literal war, but Vice President Biden has announced that he has set up a war room to put together lawyers who will be ready all over the country to litigate issues involving the election. And finally, we'll talk a little bit about violence. Violence by the police, violence against the police. How do you strike the appropriate balance, making sure that we're protected by the police, but the police don't abuse their power? We'll talk about those issues on The Dershow. On Tuesday, a great event will occur in the White House. The Emir of the United Arab Emirates, the Prime Minister of Israel, the President of the United States, and perhaps others will be meeting to sign a normalization agreement between Israel and its Arab neighbor. I was invited to the event. I wish I could have gone, but my family has put me in isolation, and here I am. Going to watch it on television rather than appear in person, but I'll be there in spirit. And I was there a little bit behind the scenes. I worked somewhat at the White House over the last several years on the peace plan between Israel and the Palestinians. I hope that the move by the United Arab Emirates will actually increase the chances, not decrease the chances, of a two-state solution to the Israel-Palestine conflict. I think that it will encourage the Palestinians to understand that they no longer have a veto over what goes on in the Middle East, that countries like the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain have their own interests, and their interests are in making peace with Israel. Israel has the most sophisticated economy, science, technology, military. Israel is capable, the only country in the Middle East capable of preventing Iran from developing a nuclear arsenal that would threaten the Gulf states. And I think the Gulf states now realize their interests are more closely aligned with Israel than they are with the Palestinians. Moreover, the Palestinians have rejected peace offers over and over again. 1938, 1948, 1967, 2000, 2001, 2008. Over and over again, the Palestinians have refused to take yes for an answer and have never missed an opportunity to miss an opportunity. And the other countries in the region don't want to miss opportunities. This is a chance to bolster their economy, to bolster their military, to bolster their intelligence, to bolster their science and technology, and they're taking that a chance. The Saudis have suggested maybe they won't make full peace with Israel until and unless Israel and the Palestinians get together. That's a message to the Palestinians as well as to the Israelis. Come, sit down, negotiate. You're not going to get a state without negotiating with Israel. Israel offered the Palestinians a state on numerous occasions, particularly under President Clinton 2000, 2001 and Ehud Barak, and then later with Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, who offered them even more, and they have never accepted a peace offer that would give them a state. So I think what's going on now in the White House, and what hopefully will extend to other countries as well, is a game changer in the Middle East, and a game changer for good. And it's bipartisan. Vice President Biden, Senator Harris, both have praised and supported the peace deal between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. It's time for all Americans to join. For me, the definition of being a bipartisan is very simple. You vote for who you want to vote for. I voted against Donald Trump. I voted for Hillary Clinton in the last election. But I praise Donald Trump when he does the right thing and when he brings about peace. I voted for Barack Obama, but I condemned him when he made the terrible deal with Iran. So bipartisanism means you condemn your people who you supported if they do the wrong thing, and you praise the people who you oppose if they do the right thing. I wish more Americans would be involved in that kind of bipartisan picking of topics and focusing on individual issues rather than demonizing one side or the other. Oh, Trump can't do anything right. Oh, Trump can't do anything wrong. Oh, Obama can't do anything right. Oh, he can't do anything wrong. No, all presidents do good things and bad things, and we have to assess them on the basis of what they did and what they didn't do, rather than on who you voted for. Once a president's in office, he's the president of all the people. And all the people ought to support the president when he does the right thing, such as helping to bring about peace between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. So I'm sorry I won't be there. I wish I could be there, because it's a great day, a day that will help bring about world peace. The Biden campaign announced that they have established a war room and a war team of lawyers to take on any challenges that may occur during or following the election on November 3rd. I don't like the metaphor of a war room. There's a big difference between litigating and fighting, but I understand. This is a political war, and I think both sides should anticipate massive litigation and legal challenges unless the election is a foregone conclusion, unless the election is so overwhelming on one side or the other that there's no credible reason for either side contesting it. Absent that, there will be litigation, and it's good to prepare for litigation. I have to tell you, I was part of the litigation in Bush versus Gore, and I don't think the Democrats were prepared for it. They made ad hoc decisions. For example, I represented the voters in Palm Beach County who were victimized by the butterfly ballot, and many of them cast their votes for Pat Buchanan, who they hated, instead of for Al Gore and Joe Lieberman, who they wanted to vote for. But in the end, the Gore campaign wasn't ready to litigate that issue, and so they didn't litigate that issue. They said they didn't want to challenge the butterfly ballot. Big mistake in my view. They picked the wrong person to argue the case in the United States Supreme Court, someone with no experience in election law and no real competence to argue in the Supreme Court. And he lost. They might have lost even if they had picked the best lawyer in the world, but they didn't. They weren't prepared. They weren't ready. Both sides will be ready this time, probably over-prepared and over-ready, but it's better to be over-prepared than under-prepared. But I think both sides have to prepare not only for a war in the courtroom, but for literally a war outside the courtroom. I worry very much that this is different from 2000. The candidates are different, the mood of America is different, and yes, there will be litigation and there will be wars in the courtroom, but I'm very worried that the losing side will take to the streets, at least extremists. And extremists on both sides always use any excuse to take to the streets. Legitimate protests are fine, but when the legitimate protests morph into looting and riots and attack on the police, recently we saw that 2 deputies were shot in cold blood while sitting in their cars, and then people went to the hospital and chanted, "We hope you die, we hope you die." That's not America. And we have to be very concerned and ready and prepared to fight against that kind of war as well. So the key is be prepared. Be prepared legally. Be prepared from a police and prosecutorial point of view to make sure that any protests remain constitutionally protected, lawful protests rather than unlawful violence victimizing innocent people. We're in for some very, very interesting times. The election may be the beginning, not the end, of a process which will lead to the next president of the United States. So be prepared and stay tuned. It seems that almost every week now, certainly every month, we experience the police shooting somebody. Often the person who shot is an African American, and the result is immediately protests and sometimes violence. It happened just recently in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, but the case there really shows the difficult challenge that police often have and the difficulty that we, the public, have in assessing what the police did. We don't know the complete facts, but there is a videotape online that shows an African American man with a knife coming toward a policeman. The police had been called on a domestic violence complaint. Apparently this man was threatening his mother or somebody in the family. The police came, and the man came at them with a knife. The police responded by shooting him and killing him. Was that an overreaction? Should the police have tried to shoot him in the leg? Should the police have tried to use non-lethal force? But you know, it was Oliver Wendell Holmes a long time ago in a case involving self-defense who said that exquisite calculation is not expected in the presence of an uplifted knife. If somebody is coming at you with a knife and you think your life is in immediate danger, you're not going to make the kinds of calculations that law professors make as to when it's appropriate to shoot lethally, when it's appropriate to try to shoot in the legs. You know, if this were a cowboy movie, obviously the Lone Ranger would just shoot the knife out of the hand of the assailant and the knife would go flying in the air. The man might lose a finger, but nobody would be dead. But that's not the way police operate in the real world. Training generally is shoot at the largest part of the body. If somebody is coming at you, the largest part of the body is the torso. Shooting at the leg risks missing. Shooting at the head risks missing. And so I don't think we should be rushing to judgment here. I don't think protest should be the first recourse to any police shooting. We should wait to see what the evidence is. We should wait for prosecutors and police experts to come in. We should see if there are other videos, if there are eyewitnesses, and then we should make a calibrated judgment as to whether the police acted responsibly or irresponsibly, criminally or non-criminally. These are very hard decisions, but the current reaction to always assuming the police are always wrong every time the police shoot somebody who is African American is going to send a dangerous message to policemen around the country. It's going to send a message, hey, you get a domestic violence call, don't go, or go slowly, or let the person do what he wants to do. Don't provoke anything because you'll get in trouble. I have a personal stake and view about this. I have a very close friend, now deceased, whose name is Frank Burns, and he was a heroic police officer in Cambridge, Massachusetts, a great man. He was called to a domestic dispute, which he told me was the most dangerous thing you can be called to because people are irrational when it comes to family violence. And he came there, and the perpetrator was holding his relative hostage. And so Frank decided he couldn't get off the first shot to try to disarm the person who was holding the hostage, who had a gun. And the person who was holding the hostage, who had the gun, started shooting at the officer, started shooting at Officer Burns. And Burns did not return fire because he didn't want to hurt the person who was being held as a hostage. The end result was that Frank Burns was shot and seriously injured, and eventually, years later, died of those injuries because he withheld fire, because he didn't want to hurt an innocent person. We have to support our police, and at the same time, we have to criticize police excesses. We have to begin to think about these issues in a calibrated, nuanced way, and we have to stop simply attacking the police, defunding the police. The police are our first line of defense against violence. We live in an age of violence. We're going to see more and more violence. We're probably going to see violence following the election. We have to now figure out how to respond to police shootings. Some are bad, some are not so bad, some are right. There's no such thing as a perfect police response when you have a situation that's volatile and evolving. And we have to recognize and we have to give the police some discretion, and we have to make sure that we understand these are people like us who go home every night to their children and their wives and their husbands, some are women, and want to live good lives like the rest of us. They don't go out there with the goal of shooting innocent people. They go out there with the goal of protecting innocent people. So I have been an opponent of police abuse for 50 years, and there is plenty of police abuse, but I am also a strong supporter of the police, of the FBI, of law enforcement when they do the right thing. And I want to give them the benefit of the doubt when they're trying to save our lives. I hope you will do the same. So we live in an age where war and peace are dominant themes. We had a good day. Peace in the Middle East between the Israeli government and United Arab Emirates. We had a bad day, a police shooting of a knife-wielding man. We had an attempt by Vice President Biden to anticipate legal problems and the creation of a war room, which hopefully will take any issues growing out of the election out of the streets and into the courts. On balance, a good day for peace, a good day for the rule of law. Let's hope we have better days in the future.